Good evening from Warsaw, Poland. I'm Anna Kalczyńska and you're watching World News Tonight. With the fall of Bashar al-Assad, the EU is wondering, should Syrian refugees be sent back? We'll come to that in just a minute, but first let's take a look at the night's headlines. Poland unveils its logo for the presidency of the Council of the EU. Transnistria declares an energy emergency as Russian gas transit deal expires. And from economics to physics, literature to peace, this year's Nobel Prizes have been awarded. The collapse of Bashar al-Assad's brutal dictatorship has left the European Union with questions about the future of 1 million Syrians who fled the war and sought refuge in Europe. Many Syrians are thinking about returning to their homeland. That includes those in Poland. Ovidiusz Nicieja has this report.
Imad al-Dahabi lives in Warsaw with his children. They run a family catering company.
My father left Syria permanently because of the regime that had been in place there for many years and which he did not agree with.
There is no such mafia in the whole world. Such a gang does not exist in the whole world. I was surprised how this world could leave such a madman, Hafez al-Assad, in power.
The civil war, which started in 2011, left some 13 million Syrians displaced, most of them internally. Millions fled abroad, though. Nearly 500,000 people were killed, including a relative of the al-Dahabi family.
Our family was significantly affected by the war. After we left Syria, during the war my cousin was killed. My uncle's son was kidnapped and tortured for many weeks by the regime.
Syrian rebels announced on Sunday morning the capture of the capital Damascus and the end of more than 50 years of rule of the Assad family. With President Bashar al-Assad gone, a new chapter has opened for Syria. The stunning news was celebrated by the Syrian diaspora in Berlin, London, Vienna, Helsinki, and many more. In each of these places, enthusiasm abounded, and many independence flags, the ones used by the opposition during the Assad regime, could be seen. This flag has now become the official flag of the interim government. Down in Turkey, lines were seen at the border crossing into Syria.
As Syria returns to stability, God willing, voluntary, safe, honorable and regular returns will increase. It is my belief that our Syrian brothers' longing for their country, which has lasted 13 years, will slowly end now. We have started seeing signs of this already. To prevent congestion and to ease traffic, we are opening the Yayladagi border gate for crossing.
Even though the future of Syria is still unclear, some European countries have suspended asylum requests from the country. The list includes Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Austria, the Czech Republic and Poland.
Until the situation in Syria is clarified, the Office for Foreigners will not issue decisions regarding Syrian citizens applying for international protection.
Austria is even preparing to send some Syrians back.
The focus will be on those who have become criminals, those who do not want to adapt to the cultural values in Europe, in Austria, or those who don't want to work and therefore only live on social benefits. They are clearly the priority in this program.
The UN has taken note of these new asylum measures regarding Syrians. The spokesperson for the UN Refugee Agency has expressed her concerns, highlighting the volatility of the situation on the ground.
Any Syrian or anyone seeking international protection must be able to access asylum procedures and have their application examined fully and individually on its merits.
Members of the al-Dahabi family are hopeful about the future of their country.
I knew that this regime would fall, but I didn't think it would fall so soon. I definitely want to return. I want to see what a free Syria looks like.
A new transitional prime minister was appointed today by the coalition of rebel groups that ousted former President Bashar al-Assad. And this is the first time in 53 years that a government in Syria is not led by the Assad family. Our correspondent Oz Katerji is joining us live from Gaziantep. Good evening, Oz. We know the rebels have wasted no time in trying to start political transition. Tell us, what do we know more?
Well, absolutely momentous days occurring in Damascus and across all of Syria. And as you said, the rebels are wasting no time with which to start moving towards the transition promised by the UN Resolution 2254 all those years ago. Now, Mohammed al-Bashir, he has been named as Syria's interim caretaker prime minister. He will be in position till March 1st, 2025. That's just stage one. You know, the process of rebuilding the country, building the institutions of the country is a long one. There are huge question marks over the rebel groups, over if they can keep law and order, if they can respect the rights of all of the citizens of Syria. These are still huge question marks that are now facing, you know, toppling the Assad regime was one thing, but rebuilding Syria in a way that satisfies the Syrian people is another. Now, we've had several things happen on the ground. On Tuesday in Damascus, we've had HTS, the main rebel group that started the offensive, that had such sweeping success in Aleppo, ordered armed groups to leave Damascus to have that replaced by HTS-aligned police officer, internal security forces. We've had banks and shops reopen after a couple of days of looting. All of this has happened in such a short time. So, you know, it really is the very, very early days, the very birth pangs of a new government, of a new Syria. So there's still much that we do not know about how any of this is going to work. We also know that there are other question marks going on with Turkey and Israel still involved militarily in Syria. So the war is not completely over yet. There are still acts of military combat taking place across the country, various groups fighting each other. The Israelis trying to take land, trying to destroy military assets that they don't want to fall into the hands of the new administration. So it's a very complicated time at the moment. We also have, you know, an interesting thing developing with the relationship that the new administration is going to have with Russia. We believe that the Russian assets are still in place at the naval base in Tartus, for example, has not been evacuated. We do not know what the new relationship between this new government and Russia will be, particularly given Russia spent so many years bombing hospitals in opposition-held areas, bombing bread lines, bombing schools, killing women and children. So this is going to be interesting to see how this develops and just what kind of relationship Russia, Iran had with the rebel groups in order to effectively tell Assad that it was time for him to step down. So very interesting times. The other big thing is that journalists are finally being allowed into Syria. And the news is that TVP World will be heading in to Syria on Wednesday, where we'll be able to bring you much more information on the ground. So tune in on Wednesday for live reports from inside Syria.
Oscar Turgi, stay safe. Thank you very much for this report. Oz heading to Damascus, joining us live from Gaziantep, Turkey. Back to Europe and back to Poland. Security Europe. That's the slogan of the Polish presidency of the Council of the European Union, coming up in the first half of 2025. The motto and the country's priorities were revealed earlier today by the Polish Prime Minister for EU Affairs. More spending on defense and lowering energy prices will be some of Warsaw's main focuses. Kazimierz Łysiak reports.
European security will be on top of the agenda during Poland's presidency and the Council of the European Union.
Security Europe. We want this motto, taking more responsibility when it comes to our safety, to be the main topic of discussions in the EU.
Behind the catchy slogan hides a wide range of goals. These will be divided into 7 aspects of security: external and internal safety of the European Union, but also information, economic, energy, food and health security. At a press conference on Tuesday, Polish ministers also revealed their country's official logo for the presidency. It was designed by Jerzy Janiszewski, the author of the logo of the Solidarity Trade Union, the movement which brought down the communist regime in Poland in the 1980s. Today, however, Europe is facing different challenges. One of those is bringing down energy prices, which are currently higher than in the United States and China.
One key element that we see is that we lack infrastructure, also infrastructure between member states. So if you want to see more renewables in the grid, then the grid has to be stronger.
As the holder of the rotating presidency, Poland will be choosing the topics of legislative discussions between EU ministers and the Council for the next 6 months. These discussions won't be easy, especially in the context of Germany and France going through major political crises.
If there will be no stable government in Germany, if there will be no stable government in France, I would suspect that the discussions will, of course, take place, but the decision-making process will be postponed or will not be to the extent it could have been without these changes happening.
Despite these unknowns, there is a lot of hope inside the bloc when it comes to the Polish presidency, especially since Poland will be taking over from Hungary, which has so far acted like a black sheep in the EU when it comes to supporting Ukraine and cutting Europe's dependence on Russian energy.
We are aware of the difficulties in the talks between the Council and the European Parliament during the Hungarian presidency. We, on the other hand, are open to discussions to ensure effective cooperation with both the European Commission and the Parliament.
Another unknown is the approach of new US President Donald Trump, both to the war in Ukraine and to trade with the European Union. Cutting aid to Kyiv and imposing new tariffs on goods are a distinct possibility when Trump comes back to office. About the same time, Poland will begin its presidency in the Council. More energy security, investments in defense, less regulations, but more competitiveness. And these will be the main focuses of Poland's presidency in the Council of the European Union in the first half of 2025. Europe needs to take more responsibility for its security. That's the main message of the Polish government. From Warsaw, Kazimierz Łysiak, TVP World.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said today that peace talks on the war in Ukraine could possibly start as soon as this winter. This comes as Poland prepares to host a series of meetings on ending the conflict.
I'd like to inform you that I will have a series of talks concerning primarily the situation beyond our eastern border. As you can imagine, our delegation will be responsible for, among other things, what the political calendar will look like, perhaps what the situation will be like during the negotiations, which, although it's still uncertain, may start in the winter of this year. I really want Poland to be the country that will not only be present, but will set the tone for these decisions that are to bring us security and secure Polish interests.
As Belarus gears up for a presidential election early next year, Brussels is showing its support for those opposing the government's authoritarian regime helmed by Alexander Lukashenko and the thousands of political prisoners currently incarcerated under his watch. TVP's World EU correspondent Angela Squeens has a special report from the opening of an art exhibition in the Belgian capital, which highlights the plight of the Belarusian people.
There are over 3,000 political prisoners currently languishing in Belarusian prisons. This includes the husband of the leader of the opposition, Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, who is currently in Brussels. Now, Madame, why is this exhibition important, and why is it important for the world to know the struggle of your husband and of those other political prisoners?
So first of all, I'm really grateful to European Union that they have organized this Days of Belarus in Brussels. It's very important for us to attract attention to Belarusian cause because so many issues are happening in the world, and sometimes people in Europe forget that Belarus is your neighbor. We are nearby, and Belarus is strategically important for security and safety of whole our region. And of course, it's double important for me that this exhibition is devoted to political prisoners, our heroes who sacrificed their freedom and some of them their lives to give us opportunity to continue this fight. And it's one more opportunity to attract more attention to humanitarian disaster that is taking place in Belarus, because for 4 years, since 2020, since last fraudulent elections, repressions are continuing every day. Every day in Belarus, people are being detained in huge quantity. We have thousands of people behind the bars, including, for example, my husband. Many of these people are kept incommunicado. It's a new word that you might be not know, but it means that people are kept in full isolation. I haven't heard anything about my husband for more than 1 year. The lawyer is not allowed to visit him. Letters are not delivered to my children. I actually don't know if he's alive. And there are so many people like him. And also we have people behind the bars who are literally dying, people with cancer, people with special needs, with diabetes, heart diseases. And these people have to be released unconditionally. So through political prisoners, through highlighting, this humanitarian disaster, we also drag attention to Belarusian courts in general, because now people of Belarus for 4 years fighting against dictatorship, against tyranny that prevails in Belarus, because people live like in Stalin's time, like in Gulag. And our task is to get Belarus out of the Lukashenko's claws and Russian claws. Also, Lukashenko dragged our country into the war with Ukraine against the will of Belarusian people, and we have to remind the world how the fate of Ukraine and fate of Belarus are interconnected. Without free Ukraine, there cannot be free Belarus, but also vice versa. We have to remember that without free and democratic Belarus, there will be no stability and security in the whole region. So we call all the people who can contribute into our fight, who can show solidarity to our political prisoners, to people who are on the front line of the fight against dictatorship. Join us, be with us. We really need inspiration. We need energy to continue. And like always remember that helping us is not charity, it's investment into your security as well.
Thank you, Madame, for speaking to us today about this very important issue that is close to home for you with your husband and for the people of Belarus. And now with the presidential election slated for early 2025, we can all say that all eyes will be on Minsk. This is Angela Skujins in Brussels for TVP World.
Transnistria, the internationally unrecognized breakaway republic, could soon be left without its main source of electricity, as a contract for the transit of Russian gas through Ukraine is set to expire. This could also spell trouble for neighboring Moldova. Krzysztof Panek has more.
A decree on the state of emergency was signed on Monday by Transnistria's leader, Vadim Krasnoselski. Parliament is expected to adopt it on Wednesday. Once the decree comes into force, Transnistria's residents will face a number of restrictions. The export of fuel and other energy sources will be prohibited, while a number of other commercial activities will be restricted. Cutting off natural gas supply to Transnistria might also spell trouble for Moldova. The breakaway region is home to the Kuchurgan gas-fired power plant, which, according to the International Energy Agency, in 2020 supplied 77% of Moldova's electricity needs. In response, Chisinau also plans to implement a state of emergency.
We are facing a challenging winter season with many risks, and I have asked Parliament to declare a state of emergency in the energy sector starting December 16th. It will last until we resolve the gas supply situation for our citizens, including those in the Transnistrian region. It is also crucial for managing the potential consequences of the crisis and ensuring electricity supply.
The decision to implement a state of emergency was triggered by the prospect of Transnistria losing its supply of natural gas. Currently, it is supplied by Russia through Ukraine, but the agreement between Kyiv and Gazprom for the transfer is set to expire on January 1st. Transnistria also borders Moldova, which considers it to be a part of its territory, but transit through that country is complicated as well.
Moldova faces now a critical energy security challenge due to its delayed transition away from reliance on Gazprom and the Russian Federation. The Moldova gas, co-owned by Gazprom, has hindered the use of alternative supply routes like the Trans-Balkan pipeline and the Romanian-Moldova interconnector.
Gazprom demands that Chisinau pay an outstanding debt for its natural gas supply, which the Moldovan government refuses to do. Chisinau plans to make its energy supply independent from Transnistria once a high-voltage power line connecting Moldova to Romania is completed sometime next year.
Eternal recognition and handsome monetary awards have been bestowed upon this year's Nobel Prize winners in the categories such as physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, peace and economics. The respective laureates received their accolades at an award ceremony in Norway's capital, Oslo. Piotr Miszczuk has the details.
In the royal presence, and on the anniversary of Alfred Nobel's death, a group of this year's Nobel Prize laureates were handed their prizes, a green gold medal plated with 24-karat gold, a diploma and prize money of more than $1 million shared within a category. Presenting the Nobel Peace Prize to an anti-nuclear Japanese organization, chair of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, Jørgen Vatne Fridnes, said this year's laureates are the light that the world needs to somehow grasp the incomprehensible pain and suffering.
I grew up after the end of the Cold War, when democracy seemed unstoppable and nuclear disarmament realistic. My generation lived through an optimistic bubble in history. That time is over.
The Secretary General of the awarded anti-nuclear organization Nihon Hidankyo and a survivor of the atomic bombing in Nagasaki, Terumi Tanaka, frowned upon the current nuclear situation.
The nuclear superpower, Russia, threatens to use nuclear weapons in its war against Ukraine, and a cabinet member of Israel, in the midst of its unrelenting attacks on Gaza and Palestine, even spoke of the possible use of nuclear arms. In addition to the civilian casualties, I am infinitely saddened and angered that the nuclear taboo threatens to be broken.
A different kind of appeal has been issued by the laureates of economics, physics and chemistry, who called for more regulation, saying that AI superintelligence will come sooner than expected. Conversely, the physics prize was awarded for AI-based protein research and the chemistry one for AI-led machine learning.
This prize, both in physics and chemistry, is viewed by many as both an encouragement, but also a vote of caution and a call for more strict regulation of the development of artificial intelligence.
In the field of medicine, the research into gene regulation has proved successful, whereas in literature, South Korean writer Han Kang was awarded for her poetic prose that often references history of her native country. And the award-winning economics research investigating the discrepancies in prosperity between states points to the most rudimentary issues, according to Grzegorz Kwiatkowski of the Maria Curie-Skłodowska University, quoting the main takeaway of the study.
Inclusive institutions are crucial to promoting economic growth and to achieving better lives for maybe not all, but most of the world.
Though 2024 didn't see any Polish Nobel Prize laureates, Poland boasts several winners, including Marie Curie, a radioactivity research pioneer who received 2 awards, one in physics and one in chemistry, and Lech Wałęsa, a Peace Prize laureate who led a successful pro-democratic effort in the 1980s.
Is the fall of the Assad regime the latest sign of Russia's declining global influence? And is the retreat of Russian troops from Syria a small crack in Putin's global strategy? Or does it foreshadow more serious concerns for the Russian Federation? Joining me tonight to discuss these questions is Ilya Ponomaryov, an exiled Russian opposition leader. Good evening, sir. Good to have you. Thank you for your time.
Well, thanks for having me. Hello.
So let's start with explaining what Russia's interests in Syria were, and while the fall of Assad is so unfortunate for Vladimir Putin. So since the 70s, I understand, Russia's foothold in the Mediterranean has been bound with this Assad dynasty. Now, as it happens, Russia's enduring military presence in Syria is going to be either more expensive or shorter or less effective and intensive. So how, in your mind, could that affect Russia's policy in the region?
No, obviously, Syria was a stronghold for Kremlin for many, many years, as you correctly said, and the relationship with Assad have a long-lasting history. That's why Russia decided to intervene. And Syria actually was more than that for Vladimir Putin. Syria was a symbol that he's returning to the role of a global player. That was the idea that was proposed to him by Iranian security chief Soleimani in the private conversation, and Putin immediately grabbed that idea that would propel Russia back to the place which belonged to the Soviet Union once, that he would solve the fates of different peoples in different countries. And that was the start of the private military company Wagner, that was created for operations in Syria, and then which expanded beyond Middle East to Africa and to other regions of the planet.
All right, so now, if you allow me, I would like to shift that our interest to Ukraine, because everyone is worrying that Russia is withdrawing from Syria, frees up additional troops that could be redeployed to Ukraine. So how will that affect the war in Ukraine, according to you?
Frankly speaking, I think that the effect on the war on Ukraine would be minimal, because the troops that were ready to fight, they were long time withdrawn from Syria. And actually, that was one of the main reasons why Russia just could not defend Assad there. And that was one of the reasons why the armed opposition decided that the moment has come and started their advancing, because they knew that Russia is no longer an assistance and Iran is no more an assistance to Assad. And that was the main trigger. The only threat that could have been real is the naval fleet that was based in Tartus. But Turkey already said that they are not letting them through the Bosphorus Strait into the Black Sea, and that's why it's not a threat either.
All right. So it's not just Syria, right? We see Russia beginning to have problems in different places in Europe. First Georgia, then Moldova, Romania as well, and big protests over Russian interference there in the electoral process. So globally, Russia's having more and more troubles, it seems, right? And all this happening in the very same time.
Yeah, I think that it's more a coincidence. The empire has outstretched itself. They don't have just enough resources. And obviously, it's a domino effect when different pieces start to collapse all at once. But that's obviously an evidence that the resources are not enough. Now, a lot depends on what would happen in Ukraine for the stability in Russia. Actually, this ceasefire agreement that so many people are talking about could be the rescue for Vladimir Putin. It can be his way out, because it would remove the major burden that his political and economic system currently has at the moment. Whether that will happen or not, we will see, but I think that Putin is definitely willing to negotiate.
Well, Lavrov doesn't seem to. He says that there's not going to be any talks so far.
I think that the proper negotiator would never disclose his cards, and obviously Putin would do everything possible that Trump and Zelensky should be at their knees begging for the negotiations, but I think that's what he wants the most.
All right. How about internal domestic problems and economic problems for Vladimir Putin? We see 28% of inflation. We have seen the ruble, which lost 10% in just one day last week. So could that escalate into some more disaffection vis-à-vis Putin and the Kremlin?
The devaluation of ruble is rather the indicator than the problem itself, because devaluation of ruble allows Putin to have more rubles to spend for his military machine and for the payments that he is doing for his military men and for the industries. But obviously, it's a sign of a deep and severe problem. And this problem is that too much is being spent on the military. Too much is dependent on this, and Russia is in a serious international isolation. Now, a lot of things are in our hands, whether we would be consistent and coherent in terms of sanctions policies, whether we would increase pressure, whether the sanctions regime would finally become smart sanctions instead of just brute foreseen sanctions, because we need the cracks to enlarge rather than the matter to solidify.
Ilya Ponomaryov, thank you very much for your insights. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon.